Hey everyone, so in this video I'm talking about writing fingering away from the piano, part 2. This was an idea that I got from the incomparable Dominic Cayley, or Dom as I call him, head of piano at Tonebase. Had the honor and privilege of having these long extended conversations with him recently, and this idea of writing fingering without the use of the piano has totally changed my practicing world. I talked about in the previous video, part 1, how I'd written the complete fingering for Ballade 3, Chopin Ballade 3 and Chopin Ballade 4 away from the piano, and this was a first for me. And at this point I have not actually gone over all the fingering at the piano yet, but I was able to do all this without the use of the instrument, and that has been really powerful and enjoyable for me to know that I don't need the instrument in order to get a lot of this work done. And here I'm going to talk about some of the things I learned from our conversations, and then now, because I've come up with my own crazy methodologies, as some of you know, if you look at the channel and playlists, you'll see, what does that mean specifically for me, for my students? How is it going to be transformed within the context of my own methods and my own practicing and teaching? So I'll share with you guys a few thoughts here. So in this channel, I hope to share with you all strategies, thoughts, mindsets, etc., often of my own creation, that I hope will help you in your piano playing, hopefully other areas of your life as well. So brief recap of part 1. We had just talked about how it apparently is extremely uncommon to write fingering away from the piano. Again, I invite you, if you're somebody that does write fingering away from the piano, please comment below. Let us know your experiences, just because we don't know of many other people that are doing this, at least at this time. And the other concepts of mine, the other big concepts of mine that it links with, writing complete fingering, meaning every single fingering, it allows you to start from anywhere in the music, separate or both hands, any fraction of a measure, mentally or physically, with 0 time delay. And also I had the recent insight or breakthrough that fingering needs to be done at some point for myself. It is a one-time effort, and it produces a lifetime return. So if it's a piece you want to learn in this lifetime, might as well write the fingering now, because that will pay you back indeed for the rest of your life evermore. And so then the implications are like, well, actually, if I can write fingering very quickly, very enjoyably, without distractions, then that's a good idea. So it's a good idea to write out long stretches of fingering without being interrupted by other tasks like normal practicing. So I'm just hyper-focusing on just writing fingering for a long time. And if I can do this in more different ways that I enjoy, more flexible ways. Sometimes I'm too tired to go to the piano, but I can just write it while lying on the couch. Sometimes fingering writing at the piano might be kind of boring, but I can do it while in a coffee house, or I can do it while on the subway, or riding public transportation, or at the airport. I am away from the instrument, and I'm not able to practice normally, but I can still get done something that's going to pay me back for the rest of my life. All of these ideas are interconnected. So I talked in part 1 about how much more enjoyable and flexible this task has now become, and I have now a much greater quantity and quality of outputs of fingerings as a result. And to be honest, I was pretty darn good at writing fingering and so on to begin with, and this includes hand redistributions and so on, as a professional pianist, teacher, and everything. And I like to think a pretty creative, innovative thinker. But this just totally upped the game. And I realized from talking to Dom that there are some things that I'm strong at, but he is just even way stronger. And it's fascinating how much fingering he's written away from the piano up to this point. So that was very inspiring. And I thought I was pretty obsessed with fingering already. This inspires me to try to get myself to another level, and then hopefully I'll be able to have more interesting conversations with him about this. So, and if anything, I was saying to him that I think you're greatly undervaluing this idea. I always want to credit you, Dominic Cayley or Dom. And, so if you start using this idea, you can certainly reach out to him and thank him as well, too, on my behalf. So I don't think it's necessary to have a teacher either to implement this idea. As I mentioned in the last video, you still have a standard of output right now at the instrument. And if you write fingering away from the piano, then you come back to the instrument, you then check the answers. Some of it's going to be correct, and this is partially what I mentioned in terms of like the list of things that I'll cover in this video. And it's if the fingering is correct, then you've saved that time because you didn't have to write it while chained to the instrument or the piano. If the fingering is incorrect, though, you always learn something new. And either you learn something new about your hands or about the layout of the keyboard. So for instance, just when I started doing this exercise, and I've written tons of fingering, I had this figuration where I was going to play 5-2-1, and then I was going to play 4-2-1, and then substitute my ring finger then for 5, or the pinky. And it turned out that that wasn't a good idea because it was too much of a stretch for my hand. And I thought, fascinating that I've played all this time and written all this fingering, and I never knew that. And it's just because I relied on the instrument too much. And the instrument really is the answer key in this case. So because I looked at the answer key too quickly, I had never allowed myself to learn, like, oh, actually, like, I think, like, it should be this without the use of the instrument. And now I have this knowledge as a result of not overly depending on it. Now I know that this particular fingering for this figuration can't work. So not only have I fixed this fingering, I have that knowledge where I'm never going to make the same mistake again with similar passages. And, you know, just like if you're in lessons or something, except that I'm kind of in my own lessons in this case, I might not get it the first time, but if I write like a really weird fingering and then I go back to the piano and I find out it's wrong, and then I understand, like, oh, I see, it's because, like, there's too much of a stretch between these fingers. And let's say that happens, let's say 3, 4, 5 times across a certain time span, then I'm eventually going to get the message to myself, like, oh, I get it. Like, I just can't use this figuration in this situation. And that will then become a part of my fingering knowledge. So I think that if it's beginners, like, I mean, you might be like totally off base. You might think like, oh, it's a great idea to like do this, and you come back and then at least you have a standard of how much you understand about your hands and fingering at the piano. You're going to have times if you try this where you come back and you're like, oh man, like I was totally off in left field. I thought that I could reach this by doing this, and my hands cannot even reach this. And that is so useful to know. If you had just relied on the instrument right away, then you might not have received that information. But because you tried away from the instrument first, then you came back, then you tried it, you learned like, oh, my hand can't reach when the notes are like this and with this sort of interval. And you didn't even need a teacher to tell you that. Now you'll always have that information, just the same as I learned when I tried something away from the piano. So I just feel like it's a win-win situation as a result, which is often the case with desirable difficulty. When you're purposely making things difficult in order to help yourself, it's like if it's correct, then you didn't have to do it at the piano. You've saved that time. And then if it's not correct, then you always will learn a new lesson. You will learn like, oh, when I have like this type of 5-note chord, then I guess if it's a 5-note chord, you probably have to use all 5. If I have this type of, let's say, 3-note chord, and that the intervals are like this, or the distances between the notes are like this, I pretty much will have to use this, you know, these fingers in order to play this. But if it's like white key, black key, white key, and I try to do that, it'll feel comfortable. If it's like white key, black key, black key, I'm going to have to do something different. Or, oh, there are these 3 possibilities for this. Like, you can get hyper-specific in terms of these trees and branches, twigs, subtwigs, and so on, in terms of, like, the correct types of solutions. So it really is like solving logic puzzles. Once you do more examples, you start extracting these underlying principles in each different type of situation. So for me, this was just a fundamental mindset shift, because I thought, like, well, what if I write it wrong? Isn't that a waste of time? I didn't realize that I would always be learning lessons about because my hands, I mean, I'm an adult and my hands they're not going to change shape or size, you know, I mean, unless I have some sort of like horrible injury, which hopefully I won't. I don't think that I will. So, but I think what I was really struck by, though, was how many lessons I was learning and am learning so quickly. It's just endlessly fascinating and interesting to me. I mean, on some level, I know that because it's like I'm not going to have an 100% ratio. Dom also says he doesn't have an 100% writing finger weight at the piano, but he is highly skilled at it. But now it's like if I've written the fingering for like the 3rd and 4th ballades, and then I'm going back to the piano, I'm first of all, I had a great time writing the finger away from the piano, which means I was able to write a lot more and do it, and not only do it in the short term, but I know that for the rest of my life, I'm going to enjoy this task because I just like doing things in different environments. I don't like being chained to the instrument all the time. It frees me up and everything. But So that was enjoyable. But now I'm also very interested in, I'm very interested to go back and check the remaining fingerings for Ballade 3 and Ballade 4. And that's going to be a really interesting, fascinating learning process as well, too, where I'm going to be able to not only correct the fingering, and then I'll have the fingering for the rest of my life, but I'll also extract lessons about what I think is possible with different intervals, different figurations for my hands that I can take with me into all future fingerings of other piano pieces. So now Dom said something really interesting too, which is that for him, fingering can be more creative away from the piano. And that means that when he's at the piano, he might default to certain possibilities and be like, I'm just going to go with this. But when he's away, there are more possibilities that open up. He might contemplate things more. There might be things that wouldn't occur to him otherwise. And I found this to be true as well, too. If I'm in different environments, if I'm not just defaulting to a certain physical habit, it's more free. It's more like reasoning from zero, where I don't make any assumptions, and I might consider possibilities I wouldn't normally. And it could be because I'm looking at nature. It could be just because I have some space away. I'm not dependent on muscle memory in order to make that sort of decision. And I want to talk about a little bit in terms of how writing the fingering helps mental practice. So mental practice, if you search David Chang mental practice, I have many different resources on this. I have long form videos. I have many YouTube shorts as well. So this is just visualizing yourself playing the piano away from the piano. And I definitely think that writing fingering improves your mental picture. I mean, heck, I'm very good at mental practice compared to even a lot of other professional pianists because it's a core part of my practice processes. But I'd say that writing fingering without depending on the instrument first, that is still improving the way that I'm conceiving of my hands and my imagination, my sense of touch and distance, my sense of the instrument. And so that will improve my mental practice, and it'll improve the mental practice of my students if they try doing this, and some of them already are. I think it can already help pianists of all different levels. Because even if you're not very knowledgeable about fingering, again, you have some ability to write fingering if you're not a total beginner at the instrument. And at least when you're your own teacher away from me, or if you're on your own, if you write stuff away, then you go back to the instrument, you're able to correct things up to your standard at the instrument at least, and then you'll learn stuff from it. So your mental practice will improve from writing fingering away because you'll be able to correct erroneous, misguided assumptions about what you can reach, what things are comfortable, what things produce a good sound, what types of figurations can use which types of solutions. And mental practice, in turn, will help your writing and fingering. Because my ability to mental practice is really, really high, that's why I was able to write fingerings for these ballades passively or even quite well away from the piano. So the better that you can visualize, the better you'll also be able to do these puzzles or these fingering puzzles away from the piano. Which is exciting because then I can do both things and they'll continue to help each other, both the writing and fingering away from the piano and mental practice away from the piano. So if you want to learn how to get better at mental practice, search for David Chang mental practice. You'll see playlists and you'll see all different sorts of things that can help you. So relatively briefly, desirable difficulty, delayed feedback, and teaching students, how does that relate to writing fingering? So desirable difficulty is purposely making things difficult for the student in order to help them. And in this case, the student may even be myself. If you search David Chang teaching by not teaching, I think I have a part 1 and part 2 for that, where I kind of describe why it is that we want to make things difficult. And so I use the example of a mock SAT or diagnostic math test a lot of the time. If you haven't taken the SAT in a while, take the mock SAT or take a mock SAT, and then we don't care if you do well or you don't do well. It's neutral. It's just a mock test. But if you take it, you don't look at the answer key, we can then see this is what the person's good at. This is their strengths, and then these are things that the person doesn't understand. These are the weaknesses. And so it's a win-win, whether it's the strengths or the weaknesses. We learn, this person can do this. He's strong, and he or she is strong in math or writing or whatever. And then the weaknesses, these are the things that they don't do as well in. So let's look at the answer key and then understand what we did wrong. And if the person then understands what they did incorrectly, that will lead to deeper learning and long-term retention, and they'll obviously remember that better than if they just took an open book mock SAT. And so that's the delayed feedback part, where they tried something on their own, they didn't look at the answer key, and then later they looked at the answer key and understood what it is that they did incorrectly, that delayed feedback. And that's what I use to teach students, whether it's within private lessons or within some of the other unusual programs in my, if you even want to call it a music school, it's a non-traditional music school. We have different, we have a group program. I also have an online mastermind called Pianists Collective. So there's all different unusual ways of teaching students. And it's different variations of, let's say I teach a student a complicated strategy, adding eighths of a measure in reverse, separate than both for each step. I'm not interested in doing that for much longer. I want the student to take that over at some point. So they practice some measures on their own. I don't help them. They try the method. They might have watched a video or I explain it, but then I don't hold their hand through it. They show it to me. And then I say hey, these things aren't correct and this is why. Either the result isn't good enough or the process, the series of steps they went through, it wasn't correct or they weren't correct. And then if they then work on their own and then apply my comments, and then eventually they can make me say, that is correct. That's exactly what I want in terms of results and or process. They can now do every moment of their own time what the lesson originally was. And so then now they can do that strategy on their own. They don't need to use the lesson time for that anymore. And they get all that value on their own. And then that frees me up to then teach higher order strategy, musicality, technique, etc. So how does all this relate to writing fingering away from the piano? Well, when we have total beginners or beginners or whoever write fingering on their own, even for a complete piece, like we had a total beginner student end up able to write complete fingering for a virtuosic piece after 6 to 8 months. This is a little bit atypical, but you can think of something a little bit less extreme than but still students write out fingering for complete pieces. They try that on their own, and then they learn tons when I then give comments, or maybe when a teacher then working for me gives comments. And first of all, it's amazing how much they're able to get right because you allow the student to just try things on their own instead of spoon feeding them everything. Adults don't really need to be babied so much. So it's amazing what it is that they got right. But then the things that they got incorrect, then they learn. Then they're oh, I see, because I explained to them oh, this wouldn't work in this situation. This is why. You want to adjust this and this is why. I can now be my own student. I wrote the fingering for the third and fourth Chopin ballades and also for other pieces as well too. And it is a weird feeling. Since I've written it without the answer key, without the teacher, and the answer key and the teacher is the piano in this case. So I come back to the instrument, I have this fingering, and it is like the fingering just fell out of the sky. It's a bizarre thing because I have all this fingering, but I don't know which of it is correct, which of it needs to be adjusted. And I am so eager to just find out how well that it is that I did, because it's oh, this is a student fingering. Some of it's good, some of it isn't good. Let me now check, and I'll be hey, this student, which is me, he did these things right, so he must understand these things really well. And then these things, he seemed to think that this was a good idea, but it actually doesn't work for if this is a black key, white key, black key. 5-3-1 doesn't work in this case. And then I explain it to him, which is really me, and I, as the student, find that fascinating, and I, as the teacher, find that fascinating. It's so interesting that I thought that was a good idea, and now I know this underlying concept for this type of passage, such that I'm going to play this correctly, and it's going to serve me well for the rest of my life because I'm going to encounter many more puzzles similar to this. And I will then have the ability to do this away from the piano because of the lessons that I've learned. That was a pretty long line of reasoning, but I think I got across what I wanted to. Literally, I'm using desirable difficulty, delayed feedback, teaching students, everything I use for teaching students, but I'm applying it to myself. And the piano is the answer key. And then the fact that I'm doing the fingering away from the piano, that means that I'm not relying on the answer key or the piano. So that's all of that. And in terms of, very briefly, how we might account for hand redistribution, other fingering-related concepts, non-fingering-related concepts. It means hand redistribution. This means things like articulation, ornamentation, articulation plans in Baroque music that aren't written down, ornamentation, non-fingering-related concepts like pedaling, shaping, and everything. I will just say that from conversations with Dom, he will account for all like hand redistribution. So like which hand takes which thing, even if it's intricate, Rachmaninoff or Bach. Like there are some things he might use the instrument slightly more, but much of it, pretty much all of it, he'll do completely away from the piano first before he even goes to the piano. And I am now doing the same thing as well too. So I understand a good amount about hand redistribution, but man, like I can improve so much more apparently. And so that means like if I don't know like whether this hand should take it or the other hand should take it in a specific configuration, whether this hand will be on top or on bottom, I'm going to try it away from the piano. And then once I get back to the piano, I'm going to learn a ton. Now, what if I make a mistake in some sort of central motif that then repeats many times throughout the piece? I think there's two ways of going about this. Either one, like I start with fingering at the piano and I notice like, oh, there are areas that repeat a lot. And so I'm going to work that out first, make sure it's right, and then I can then, carry that out away from the piano. I know this is right, therefore I can copy over the same or similar fingering for everything else. Another thing that we might do though, and Don brings up that he does this, is sometimes he'll notice something repeats and he'll just kind of bracket it off, and before he copies it over like 20 times, when he comes back to the piano, he'll make sure that that's right before he then copies over for same or similar sections. So I think either one of those is a fantastic idea. Now, I, of course, think that there are implications for these other concepts as well in the context of, or maybe not, of course, but I think there are other implications. So I may also be experimenting with things like writing shaping, like crescendos, decrescendos, pedaling, and such away from the piano. Now, something like pedaling, definitely, it may change a lot depending on the instrument, the hall. Some people may think it's pointless. I still think it's worth trying for me to have a default plan that I can then deviate from. So I'll still try some other things, and I'll let you guys know if and when I find some results there, because I find it really compelling. So we both agree that writing fingering away from the piano is truly a skill to be cultivated. So the more that you do it, the better that you'll get. And I mean, I'm really inspired by Dom and what an incredible ability he has to do this. I would be so bold as to say I'm pretty good at this already because of the knowledge I have of writing fingering from teaching and playing these many, many years. I think I'm actually stronger at it than the typical person, and I'm really strong in mental practice, like because of mental practice and my logical methodology within the context of mental practice. But that being said, I'm willing to put on the beginner's hat again now and see I still have so much that can be improved, and that is deeply exciting to me. So I'm just having a fantastic time just writing fingering like all over, different areas. So if I'm too tired at the end of the day, I might have said in this video or the previous video, I might be writing fingering for 2 hours on the couch or something like that, or lying in bed, anywhere that I can read. And then I'm just writing it like whether it's a coffee shop, the airport, on the airplane, on public transportation, even literally standing, waiting in line. I'm able to do this now, and it's just fantastic for my practicing processes. And now, like, my students are starting to do it as well too. So anyway, hope you found this interesting. I hope that my passion for this has come across. Let us know if you have any questions. Let me know if you have any questions. Please like, subscribe, let people know about the channel if you found this valuable, and looking forward to the next one.